Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Despite all that has taken place over the last 2 years, what is of utmost importance at this point in time is the 20-point plan for Gaza unveiled by US President Donald Trump. This has been publicly accepted by Prime Minister Netanyahu and many regional and global leaders, while awaiting formal approval by the terror organization known as Hamas. If this indeed does occur, with the US presumably having checked this box prior to going public with the plan, a series of military, diplomatic, and political moves will then unfold. While this may not yet be the day after the war, it is at least the day after the launch of the Trump plan. So, as we adjust to this new reality, what are the perils and prospects on the roadmap towards the plan's implementation? Joining us to analyze this matter include Dr. Mike Duran, who is a senior fellow and the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute, formerly a senior director at the NSC in Washington, D.C. for the Middle East and North Africa region. It's great to see you, Mike.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you.
It is genuinely a pleasure hosting you, and no less so is a Major General in Reserve, Gilshon Cohen, formerly the commander of the defense colleges in Israel, as well as an Army Corps commander, and a long list of other senior positions. It's great to see you, General.
Hi, good to see you.
And last but not least, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, a new dawn, a new age. Thousands of years, apparently, of war have come to an end. Not yet. Of course, we are waiting for the Islamist Hamas, and particularly for two elements within this terrorist organization, the Iran wing. Let's talk about that for a moment.
So apparently, not since Adam and Eve left paradise, or at least when the snake used to reside there, has there been such a momentous event, at least according to some observers, not uninterested observers. But you're asking about a new dawn. Washington, as you know, is 7 hours away from Israel. When it's dawn in Washington, it's already mid-afternoon here. And we are still waiting for the formal Hamas response, which up to now has never been definitive. It's always yes, but in principle we accept, however, nevertheless, and all these modifiers. But assuming that they will be prevailed upon by their benefactors, Turkey, Qatar, maybe others, we will see whether in practice we are going to see, first of all, the exchange of hostages for prisoners, all of whom are murderers. And mind you, the last time there was such an exchange, 14 years ago, the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, emerged from it. So it stands to reason that the next leader of Hamas could come from this batch of 250 lifers, those who were sentenced to at least one life sentence, or the hundreds of Hamas terrorists who were captured on October the 7th and the next several days and weeks, but did not stand trial because Israel knew that it will have to exchange them. So it's a very perilous time for everyone involved, even though the families and the hostages themselves, the 20 of them who are alive, will be overjoyed.
Let's put things, though, in perspective, since the Islamist Hamas has not yet given its approval to the deal. They did say that they would provide an answer to the Qataris and Turkish leadership tomorrow, which does indicate some sense of deliberations behind the scenes. But nonetheless, when we're talking about the current leadership, whether it's Khalil al-Haya, possibly or presumably in a hospital somewhere in Doha, Qatar, and the most senior field commander of the Islamist Hamas in the Izzeldin al-Qassam brigades, namely Izzeldin actually is his own name as well, General. They are both considered to be part of the Iranian wing, which does not necessarily have an interest in ending the war at this point in time and giving a wing to the West in this context. So from that perspective, Dr. Duran, are we just coming to the point where Hamas will once again say, as Mr. Owen just stated, yes, but?
Well, we have to wait and see. If they do, that'll be very interesting. The most, I guess, for me, significant aspect of what President Trump revealed yesterday is that he has put together a consensus between the United States and its Arab and Muslim allies that this is the way forward. And in a sense, there's a challenge here to the Turks and to the Qataris to deliver Hamas. President Trump is basically saying, if you can deliver them, well, that's very significant. And if you cannot deliver them, well, that's very significant. If they don't deliver them, then Israel has a green light from the United States to do whatever it takes to end Hamas rule in Gaza. And if they do accept, then they're also accepting that they'll no longer be the ruling political element in Gaza. Now, the 21-point plan has lots of principles about how Gaza is going to be ruled. How that's actually going to be implemented practically is something that we'll have to see as time goes on. And there will undoubtedly be room in there for Hamas to try to maintain some political position indirectly or sub rosa in the system. But there's a consensus now between the United States and all of its allies, at least a formal consensus, that Hamas should be ended as a military threat to Israel and as the ruling political entity in Gaza. I think that's a big win for Israel and for Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to ask you, General, when we're hearing what Mr. Owen just mentioned, and that raises also many concerns. In 2006 or 7, when Gilad Shalit was taken at the time, ultimately the Islamist Hamas managed, after several consecutive years, to leverage him, one single Israeli soldier, for a number of Islamist terror operatives incarcerated, including a couple of them with life sentences, to get them free. One of whom was no other than Yahya Sinwar. This time around, the Trump plan suggests the release of 250 such incarcerated individuals, alongside 1,700 others that were captured following the atrocities which Hamas committed against Israel on October 7th of 2023. What is the security calculus in such a devastating, and I say this in really those type of proportions, but a devastating release, which would undoubtedly see them not turn to peace after their release, but to turn yet a very large group of individuals who have been part of those terror infrastructures that have been destroyed in Gaza to potentially reinvigorate what we've been fighting to extinguish in the first place.
Yes, indeed. It is a very serious anxiety. You describe it perfectly. And it is quite early, really, to find a route for security calculation, how really we can manage that potential of risk. And what is really important is not the half glass that empty with all that anxiety that you are describing. What there is also another half glass that is quite full, And what it means for Israel, actually, it is clear, it was clear for everyone that we found ourselves, the Israelis, under a dramatic unsolved tension. In one side, we realized that we must bring Hamas to unconditional surrender. It was a definite goal of that war. On the other side, we lost legitimation in the international arena and also in Israel for following the war. Actually, that moment in the last meeting with the lunch in the White House in Israel, it was last evening, creating a way out for Netanyahu from that unsolved tension. It means that not the tension is coming to be solved, but there is a kind of synchronization between these unsolved expectations of the Israelis. We must find a way to bring an end, a respectable end to that war. And it looks like there is an option now to find a common acceptance among Israelis that this is a way.
Mr. Oren, the glass is both half empty and half full, but let's focus for the moment on the latter. What are the benefits of this deal beyond the fact that it does fulfill the majority of Israel's war aims, as were established by the Jerusalem cabinet in the onset?
So I'm not an expert on glasses, but it would seem to me that if what General Cohen has described is true, we should aim for a smaller glass, and then it would be full. There would be no half empty. What I'm driving at is that rather than try to pursue maximum goals, which are unattainable, such as total victory, the optimum should be sufficient for us after 2 years of war on several fronts, Hezbollah, Iran, perhaps not the end of the story with Iran. The military must be refreshed and recuperate the reserve soldiers. Many thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, must go home to return to their normal lives. And after a respite, probably new elections, maybe a new political management, Israel would go back to protecting itself offensively too.
Si vis pacem para bellum, the Latin for if you want to prevent war, you must prepare for one, but nonetheless...
where are those who said these words? Where are they now?
Well, not in this realm. Well, we just said it, so there you go.
That's true.
Dr. Duran, I'd like to zoom out a little bit, since President Trump, in his joint remarks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in that press conference in the White House, did also mention that this is merely a one step in a broader plan, or rather 21 steps in a broader plan. He did mention Syria, he did mention Lebanon. He highlighted his gratitude to Jordan, to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey and Qatar, and so on and so forth. Of course, to their leaders. They're not necessarily the best examples of democracy. But nonetheless, in your perspective, what is to be taken out of the remarks that were made by the president for a broader architecture that he intends to try and orchestrate?
Well, clearly he has the idea of expanding the Abraham Accords or the Abraham Accords or the Avraham Accords, depending upon who's discussing them. And he has an idea of a regional peace based on those accords. I'm do I want to say skeptical? I'm not sure what the right word is. I'll just say that I'll believe that when I see it. not because I think it's a bad intention or an ill-founded intention. It's just that I think the Turks, the Saudis, they are not 100% on board on this at this moment. Now, once the Gaza war is over, it could well be that Mohammed bin Salman will be more interested in overt cooperation with Israel. I could imagine that happening. But if we look at all the signals coming out of Saudi Arabia right now, since the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, the Saudis are not showing any inclination to work overtly with the Israelis, and of course they were very much part of the effort to work with the French to convince, persuade Europeans to recognize the Palestinian state. President Erdogan, at the same time, is increasingly presenting Israel as the problem in the region. And there's kind of a three-way competition going on among Mohammed bin Salman, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan to see who will be the primary interlocutor with President Trump for creating a new peaceful Middle East. It doesn't mean that they're all hostile to each other, but I don't think that certainly Erdogan and maybe Mohammed bin Salman wants to put peace with Israel or strong relations with Israel at the forefront of their regional project. So there's a lot of space, I think, between getting a ceasefire in Gaza and getting some kind of larger architecture in place. We just have to watch it and see where it goes. This is not to say that I think that yesterday's presentation was not a very positive step or even a major step. I think it was a great way of reconciling the contradictions that General Hakohen mentioned. There are contradictions and tensions in this, but they are at least balanced for the moment, and a way forward has been projected. And that the key issue here is the way forward means without Hamas.
Absolutely. Well, I will point out that Turkey has, of course, placed Israel at a top level in its so-called Red Book, which is its national security or grand strategy, published, or rather not published, every 5 years, but there are certain excerpts that it does leak to the Turkish media, and it does view Israel in a very hostile light, and it's gradually worsening from one Red Book to another, while at the same time Israel has just accepted all of the prerequisites that Saudi Arabia has relayed to Israel with regard to the joining of the Abraham Accords prior to October 7th, to include a political horizon, or at least a declaration of a political horizon for the Palestinians. And we have not heard anything from Riyadh in this regard. So it does provide those indications that Dr. Duran has just mentioned. And while those 2 points are important in their own light, nonetheless, the Iranians continue to be heavily entrenched when we're talking about their activities throughout the region. They have not let down on rehabilitating their battered proxies. Their infrastructure in Syria has not subsided despite the transition of the regime, and they're waiting for the best opportunity to once again sweep in at the expense of Turkey and Israel and others. So there are a lot of complexities on that. But at the same time, when we look at Lebanon, with the American project there to try and encourage the government in Beirut to demilitarize the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. This Iranian proxy that this past weekend marked 1 year since their Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah was eliminated, remains steadfast in its staunch opposition to relinquishing any of its weapons. And this is becoming more and more tense in the northern environment of Israel. General Cohen, in this context, are we on the precipice of potentially yet another escalation in Lebanon in the event that Hezbollah does not disarm?
Actually, we are really facing a new era with new potential regarding everything. But yet, it is far away from bringing the hope that we are immediately or in short time coming to meet a new time of peace in the region. What's going on in Lebanon, according to the last speech of Naim Qassem, is definitely not new. They are insisting to keep their devotion to the idea of El Mukawama. It means the idea not just of resistance, it is the idea to keep permanent struggle. And for that, they need the whole equipment, and the equipment for themselves is a holy idea, because the struggle that they are devoting themselves to keep it permanently is holy for them. So the same about Naim Qassem, the same about Larijani, the delegator from Iran that came to Lebanon, and all of them, including the Houthi, are realizing that they are facing a new order in the Middle East, but yet they are not trying to find a route for better hope for peace or something like that. They are just looking to find a new route for a new struggle, including in Syria. It means that even if Israel and the President Julani could come to agreement about status quo, security status quo in Syria, it really doesn't bring a promise for a new reality due to the whole devotion for permanent struggle.
I'd like to briefly return to you, Dr. Duran, since you interviewed a couple of weeks ago Dr. Sebastian Gorka, the National Security Council's senior director for counterterrorism in the White House. He mentioned that President Trump views everything happening in the Middle East from a prism of Iran, Iran, Iran. Whatever he looks, that is the where it comes from, the perspective, so to speak. Is this still the case in today's context? And do you view the various actions undertaken within this plan, within the broader context of issues, from a prism of we need still to deal with this main threat to the international community post-snapback, which obviously ratchets up much pressure on the Ayatollah regime, but nonetheless, it still pursues nuclear weapon proliferation via its various limited capabilities?
Absolutely. There are two major perspectives on the Middle East in Washington today. One perspective, that would be the Barack Obama perspective, which says that the United States needs to focus on East Asia, on the China threat, particularly the threat to Taiwan militarily. We do not have the resources to devote to wars in the Middle East. And so therefore, we should cut a deal with Iran. We should be more open to accommodation with it in places like Yemen, Lebanon, and in Iran itself. The nuclear deal, the 2015 JCPOA, that was just the beginning of a larger accommodation with Iran around the region. The other view, which I'd say is the Donald Trump view, is that Iran is pretty much inveterately hostile to the United States. And the job of the United States is to organize a coalition to counterbalance it, prevent it from getting a nuclear weapon, and weaken its proxies. But there's an overlap, however, between the Obama view and the Trump view. And the overlap is that both of them regard East Asia as the primary theater. So Donald Trump wants Donald Trump wants peace in the Middle East in order to focus on East Asia. He wants peace in Ukraine to focus on East Asia. But unlike Obama, he thinks that Iran is not amenable to a deal and needs to be pressured, and pressured considerably. But there's still a point beyond which Donald Trump doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to get involved in a major conflict with Iran, and we see that there are real limits to how far he can go. And it's that the recognition of Trump's limits that makes Hezbollah and Iran think that they can hold out. Hamas think that they can hold out. If they just hold out long enough, then American policy will switch back to the more accommodationist policy, and they'll be able to revive themselves. So Trump put the fear of God into the, if I can use that word, we're talking about the Islamic Republic. It put the fear of God into them, but he hasn't totally convinced them that the resistance program that they have been following since the foundation of the Islamic Republic is really at an end, and they have to come up with a new with a new playbook.
Fascinating. I will also add that within this context, the Islamic Republic continues to push the efforts to flood Judea, Samaria, the Jordan Valley with weapons, funds, and other types of influence that it's trying to gain, particularly in the northern Samaria region, which, if we put things actually in historic context, that is what triggered the Operation Wavebreaker that ultimately brought about also the trigger to the Islamist Hamas launching the atrocities on October 7th. And it seems like this cycle is still not over as we speak. But nonetheless, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today, and we'll discuss all of this much more in the near future. I'd like to immediately thank also Dr. Mike Duran and General Gil Shona Cohen for all of your insights, to thank, of course, also our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren, and to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.